Jason, all eyes on you, my friend.
Awesome. I'm going to turn off my video because I don't know if it's my connection or what, but everything seems really choppy right now. So thank you guys for having us, or ladies and gentlemen, for having us here tonight. Fred Rogers is here. He's the area manager for Woodard and Curran. And I think Michelle said Brian's here as well. So we're here just to talk about the projects we put forward for this coming year. And let me, Michelle, can I share my screen?
Also.
So she gets that. So we're this year we're doing something a little bit outside of the a typical scenario. We're putting forward water main projects that are both for this year and for next year.
Okay.
The reason being is the idea is to try and apply for federal funding for some of these projects. And the funding process for those is you have to have town meeting authorization to even apply for the funding through the SRF program. So by having a town meeting vote authorizing the 2024 projects, it would allow us to apply in this coming summer for state funding. And the SRF program is typically how funding like the ARP money will be, some of the ARP money will come out through the SRF program. So in the SRF program, the base, if you get awarded, is 2%. During an ARP scenario, you can get down to 0% and or principal forgiveness. So the goal is to apply for those projects for a year ahead of time. They wouldn't start till July of 2023, no matter what, whether we're awarded the SRF funding or not. But that would be the process, would be that they would happen in the July of 2023, those projects. So we're putting forward the Beechwood Street from King Street to the bridge as for this coming summer, and then Atlantic Ave from the bridge to the beach, South Main Street from Brooks to Summer, Beechwood Street from Norman Todd to 3A, and then Stone Street from the cemetery to Church, and then Church to the town line. Those are the proposed projects. We did, the other piece too, so we put these these projects got jumbled around a little bit due to the paving plan changes. And in doing that, we went forward at the last town meeting with the capital plan, had $3.9 million in the plan for 2020, for 23 and 24. The current plan is the current plan is 3.39 million. The proposed at town meeting was 3.4. So we're actually a little bit shy of what we originally had put forward, but we're in the range. And this is the current updated modeling, given those new projected borrowings. And the question that came up, our current retained earnings is 1.3 million, and that is after the allocation of the funds at fall town meeting. So given that, I will stop and answer any questions people might have.
Can you take us, Jason, can you take us back to the model that you just had up a second so that we can maybe take a moment to digest some of the numbers and how you think about the funding for these projects and the impact on the water department's ability to pay for the debt? So,
so in the study, we project borrowing for everything.
okay.
Other than like here where you see a little red, that's a truck purchase. We project borrowing for everything, but we may actually use retained earnings to pay for the Beechwood Street water main project at Springtown meeting, given we have 1.3 there in retained earnings, and it's a $700,000 project. We haven't really discussed exactly how we're going to pay for that, but we may use a portion of retained earnings and a portion borrowing. But as far as the projection is concerned, everything is borrowed at 4%, which is the worst case scenario.
Okay, so 3.4 million in borrowings, and let's just want to understand sort of where we are in terms of our existing borrowings outstanding. Oh, right. Existing.
So the gray here is the existing debt,
Yeah. And then
and the black is the new debt.
okay, but that's debt service. That's not total debt, right?
No, that's the debt. That's our payments, our annual payments. Yes.
Okay. And okay, so it looks like it looks as though with these incremental debt payments in some of the years we're actually through the green line. What does that mean?
So these are all projections. These numbers, including the expenditures. In all of our expenditures, we projected 2.5% increases. In some lines, we actually projected more than 2.5%. So as we get to some of these years where you see $100,000 negative, that might be a scenario where we spend cash to do a project and therefore bring that line down below the green. So yes, it does show there's a negative there, but you're talking about a projected operating budget 3 years from now. So we'll just budget to meet that number when the time comes. We'll adjust our operating budget accordingly to meet the revenue.
So, okay, so we're basically okay. So how much control do we really have over our operating expenses? Aren't they driven entirely by the volumes that we're handling?
No, so you have operating expenses. Some of them are extraordinary system maintenance. You can do a little bit less maintenance in a year. We project replacement of a certain number of hydrants every year. So you may have a year where if we're having an issue, reduce the number of known maintenance expenditures to meet a budget goal.
Okay. I mean, it seems like that would work in any given year, but it doesn't seem like there's any relief in the subsequent years where you would actually have some excess free cash to catch up if you defer a little bit in any given year, right? I'm just looking at this. I mean, we go, in fiscal 20.
We actually,
sorry, go on.
If you go out, if you go one more year out in this plan, that's when a huge debt roll off happens. And
okay.
I think I just froze up. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Hopefully everyone else can as well.
Yes. So there's a big debt roll off in that next
fiscal
year
30, right?
So there's actually a big drop off there. Yes.
Okay. How do you guys think about your retained earnings target and a decision to pay for a project out of cash as opposed to just borrowing? So there's a retained earnings target. There's a yellow shaded area in here, right?
That was done by the rate study person. That's not necessarily our band of a target.
Okay.
That's something that we discuss on an annual basis between Don and the water commissioners to determine whether we pay cash for something or whether we borrow or whether we pay a portion cash, like we did with the project last year or last annual town meeting. We pay
Right.
for one project out of retained earnings, and we pay for the bigger project out of a borrowing.
Okay, so you don't have any visibility into why the folks that did the earnings, or the rate study suggested these levels for retained earnings?
No, that's just
Okay.
that was just a banded look at something. 60% retained earnings is a significantly high retained earnings number,
Right.
which is why we're looking to spend some of that down.
Yeah, I'm just, and so that yellow shaded area, is that a band of retained earnings, or is that the actual, should we look at the top of that line to, as what the target would be?
Don't even look at that line.
Okay,
I wouldn't even look at that line. Just look at the yellow line as being the actual projected retained earnings. Don't look at the band necessarily.
okay, so just look at the top of it.
I missed that, Brian, sorry.
But you're saying to actually just look at the actual yellow line?
Yeah, look at like the 50, like that's our retained earnings. Like we're at 65% of operating costs in retained earnings. So that's where we would look at expending those retained
Right, and
earnings
that's so
as
that's
a
where I'm going.
capital project versus holding that much
Right,
retained earnings.
So is that, so that line, does that line actually represent a fixed dollar amount on the left-hand axis? That's what I'm trying to understand. And then the percentages are just percentages of the, of the green line? Or actually, that's the rate increase. Sorry, I guess it would be
the yellow number is in this. The yellow number circled is the percent retained earnings in relationship to operating budget.
Okay, but the line itself shows an absolute dollar amount. That's what I'm trying to understand.
The green line?
No, the yellow line that connects the yellow circles that have the percentages in them. The line itself does.
Yes, sorry. Yes, you're right.
The line itself
Correct.
shows an actual dollar amount.
That is the actual retained earnings. Yes,
okay.
Correct.
And so what are we doing in fiscal 25 to spend down on our retained earnings number? See how it drops from 25 to 20?
I would have to look.
Isn't it that
it could be an
additional
increase
debt
also in operating budget that year? Yeah. You have an increase. So it's
Well, I understand.
The dollar is decreasing.
The dollar's decreasing as well, right? I mean, the operating budget didn't go up by.
In 25, we, according to this plan, Brian, we have to spend $100,000 of retained earnings to balance the budget in 25, according to the model. Let's call
right,
it.
and then in 26,
and then we spend in 26, we spend $500,000. So that's where we would work to yes.
Okay, I guess I'm just curious. Do we actually have something earmarked for that $500,000 spend, or are we just saying we'd have to spend $500,000?
The idea is to look at something in FY26 as far as an operating budget is somewhat in flux, as well as how we spend and borrow between now and 26 is going to change.
Right.
So to look at a $500,000 decrease there may not actually be the case. So if we borrow it better than 4.5 or 4.5%, the debt goes down, and therefore we won't be at $500,000 of a loss, quote unquote.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand the methodology between, what I'm really trying to drive at, Jason, and I apologize if I'm getting tedious on this. What I'm really trying to understand is, in fiscal 24, where the operating number, gets right up to our full rate line, right? The operating expense line, stacked bars gets right up against our rate increase. and then the next year it goes through. And so I'm in my head, I'm asking the question, should we be actually using some of our retained earnings at that point to pay for a project and reduce the debt service to keep the operating expenses comfortably below our rate level so that we don't have to defer maintenance or any other sort of odd sort of, unnatural acts just to make the budget balance in a given year.
That is what will happen. That is what will happen, Brian, but
Okay.
to pick and choose what we decide to pay cash for now 4 years out is hard to say. So we just put a borrowing in and we will probably pay cash. Like I said, we're probably going to pay cash
I'm not
for
thinking about the
Beechwood Street water main, which would then decrease.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not thinking 4 years out. I'm thinking in fiscal 24, where we're literally bumping right up against the rate, the revenue. Anyway,
But if I borrow, this is the point. If I pay cash for Beechwood Street water main this year, 700, that then cuts $20,000 off of my black new debt service, and therefore will push it below the green line in 24.
Right.
As well as if I get better than 4% borrowing on the $3.4 million activated carbon project, that saves like $40,000 in debt service a year.
Right. Yeah, that can go both ways. You're talking about bonding a couple of years out from here.
I can't imagine it would be over 4%, but I guess we could be.
Okay. I've been monopolizing this conversation because I've been really just trying to understand the rationale behind exactly what's shown on this chart. But I guess I'd encourage, other members of the committee to ask questions. I don't want to totally monopolize this. Ralph, any thoughts? Question?
Well, yeah.
Mike has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Michael. I didn't see it.
Well, I am hopelessly lost in all of this. The conversation started with a request for $2.63 million. That's the request in front of us, correct? You there? Anybody?
Yes. Hold on, let me add it together. Hold on, let me add that together.
I'm looking at the funding request form for the upcoming town meeting. And it shows an amount requested of 2.63 million to replace the water mains that you've shown us on the map. And that's what's in front of us, correct? That's what we're
3.3 million. We're at 3.3 million requests tonight.
The amount requested
One is
on this
Beechwood
form is
Street, which is
2.63 million. That's what's in front of us. Are you changing it?
There's two forms. There's two forms in front of you right now.
Okay, let's take one at a time then.
There's Beechwood Street water mains. Okay.
Okay, so reading this,
Beechwood Street water main.
that's what I'm looking at. Beechwood Street, Doane, Atlantic Avenue.
No.
Well, that's what I'm reading here. Submitted on the 8th of December.
This one here is one. Yep. There's two different on Beechwood Street. There's Beechwood Street from King Street to the Brown Brook Dam. And then there's Beechwood Street from Norman Todd Road to Route 3A.
Okay, so let's take these one at a time.
You look at the map.
Because that's the best I can do
Okay.
and try to follow. Let's take them one at a time, and I happen to pull up the big one, 2.63 million. And so my question is, can we afford it? And how safe are we in spending this money? Or what are the odds, what are the chances for escalation in the amount requested?
So Michael, if I can just jump in.
Escalation in the amount.
Hello?
Yeah,
Just for clarification, Michael, I think Jason said it at the beginning of his talk that they wanted to look at these 2 fiscal years together.
I see, I understand.
Yeah.
And so I'm taking the first of 2. I am not comfortable lumping them together right now until I really understand what we're being asked. So I understand we've got 2 because we're trying to take advantage of a state program.
Mhm.
No guarantee on that. And so just looking at it at its most basic, we're being asked, the town is being asked to approve 2.63 in enterprise funds for the water department to do the cast iron water main replacements on several streets that are included on this 2.63 request form. I also understand, thanks for correcting me or getting me straight, that we have another request for 700,000, separate project. And so the same question in my mind is, are we in safe harbor in using enterprise funds to fund this project with or without the state? And are there any, what's the potential for unexpected cost overrun, which we've seen in the past? The whole chart that you're
So
going through,
the
Brian,
overrun we had on,
is completely Greek to me. And I feel like it's not helpful right now, unless you can, it's not helpful right now. I really want to focus on the question in front of us. So that's where I'm coming from. And love to hear from the rest of the committee on what they want to focus on here.
so as far as potential cost overruns, we generally haven't had any. Elm Street wasn't necessarily an overrun. It was additional scope of work that was outside of the original request. We extended that water main for a further length because it was a portion that we didn't realize was being paved as part of that paving project. We thought the paving project originally was Elm Street, quote unquote, but it's actually was going all the way around to Stockbridge. We allocated more money for that. In these ones, in these requests here, we actually use a higher number per linear foot than previously used for the fear of potential increases due to COVID for material costs. So we have, we think we have a good number here for to start with the $700,000 request. We feel like that's an adequate amount to cover Beechwood Street. We're not putting the pipe in a new location, so we don't have to worry about rock. We're going to be removing and replacing the existing water main. So it will go in the same trench that the existing water main's in.
So that's one of 2 requests. What about the other request for 2.63 million? What are the chances?
Again, we
or have
escalated
you
that.
have you built in contingency in terms of the cost per linear foot?
We put in the higher number per foot for pipe, as well as increased it by a year for inflation. So it's got another 5% increase due to inflation costs for those improvements.
Right. And can these projects be paid for by the enterprise without state support?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Jason.
No problem. Sorry for the confusion, Mike, with the two projects.
Yep.
Ralph, you had waved your hand at one point.
Yeah, I guess there are a few things, Jason, that, I think it's great to show those projections. I think they're interesting, and I did expand them and looked at them pretty carefully. So, but they are projections and they're not actuals. We don't have actuals. Last year we had actuals. This year we don't have actuals. So there's a complete missing piece of all of this, which was a very detailed analysis of all of your expenses, all of your income, and where it was coming from and how much it was going to be. That's all missing today. That's why I think Don ought to be on this call, and that ought to be shown. I don't think we should actually just assume those numbers are right because they're projections, and they've been fairly stable over a couple of years here, at least 2 or 3 years anyway, as far as I can tell. So the real question is, what are the actuals? Okay, there was a projection of at least $300,000, for example, of additional revenue as a result of your increase in rates and also your fourth tier water rate. Did that happen or not? And it was necessary in order to cover, in fact, your fiscal 23 numbers. In the absence of that, it's a real problem for me. I don't see any financials here other than projections. Those are not financials. So we don't have any financials, which is interesting. And as I see it, let me finish. There's our duty here, Jason. Our duty is specifically to make sure that your ability to pay, that is the department's ability to pay for its expenses and its capital improvements, are covered in some way. And so we need to know the numbers directly rather than indirectly by projection. The other thing I will note to you is unusual to have neither Don Pyatt nor any member of the water department who are legally responsible for this department on this call. I don't know, maybe somebody is, but I don't see them. But the point is that this is an odd way to deal with it when in fact they're not on it and we don't have actuals. So I'm not condemning it. I'm just saying we don't have those things, and I think we ought to have them. I just want to be sure that, as we always say, be sure we can cover, you can cover, water department can cover their actual expenses and their future spending based on water revenue. So that's the quick question. So I don't have an answer to that, but I do think this is missing important pieces of information. So
I can get you the actuals. As far as the projections are concerned, or the rates were concerned, we did have a very wet summer this last summer, as we all know. So there was a less than projected revenue for the summer quarter this year, but our pumping was down. Typically, we're pumping 12 to 14 hours a day in the summer. The guys were working 8-hour days this summer. There was no one was watering their lawns. So, but we are meeting our revenue goals this year, even with that out. We're making up for it with some connection fees and other revenue sources. But there was a shortcoming on the tier 3 due to the inclement weather. For this year's proposed budget, we decreased, we didn't decrease, but we level funded the projected income from the usage-based water.
So the only
And I know John Steinmetz was invited to the meeting. I'm not sure if he couldn't make it or not.
Okay. I guess the key thing would be to match up actuals against projected rather than just continue to use projected without actuals. That's how I look at this. So other than that, I don't have any comment. I just want to make sure you guys can cover your expenses and your capital improvements. And you've got a lot going forward. You've got several $3 million expenditures going forward based on your charts. So you got a lot of money being spent going forward, presumably for good things. Don't doubt they need to be done. You just got to make sure that you've got revenue to cover it all.
Jason, it's kind of a tricky question that I have, but if you don't get the federal grants you guys are looking for, will you still do all of these projects?
Yes,
You will still do all of these projects over the course of the next 2 years. Okay. I mean, I'm not sure the answer to your question would,
yes,
your answer to my question would change the way that we have to look at this, which is, you're asking for, for our recommendation for approval of these with or without the grants. So that's how we have to look at it. But okay, so this is happening whether the grants are happening or not.
correct.
That's certainly the cleaner way to look at it.
So Jason, on
I
the
mean,
federal
the
funding,
reason being, these,
Jason, on
what
the
did you
federal
say, sorry,
funding,
Susan? Sorry, I missed it.
no. On the federal funding, it says that it's either a 2% loan. So that's a delta of 2% on the cost of what you have in your model. Potentially zero or potentially principal forgiveness. Those are the three possibilities.
Correct.
Okay.
Jason, do we have insight as to, what would cause the controllers of those grants to put us in, any one of those buckets?
They're not grants. It's a state, it's called the State Revolving Fund.
Okay.
So one of the benefits we get for being the town of Cohasset is we're regional to an extent because we supply water to Hingham and Hull as well.
Okay.
So regional projects get a better rating as far as these are concerned. That, like for the GAC project, because it has a PFAS component, there's a really high likelihood we might get some money for that. So, and with the older water mains, like these 1900s water mains, we'll be able to put in potential for lead service removal due to the fact that some of these services are actually still lead gooseneck, given the age. So that will give us additional points, quote unquote, in the scoring process. So the benefit of this SRF program is it's not solely a based on the wealth of the community, but the project itself is scored on its merit to the customer base, basically.
Okay. We also provide water to Situate in a pinch, right?
Yeah, but when you do the application, you say what you're physically supplying water to.
Okay. All right. So no additional points for actually helping out a neighbor when they're about to run dry?
I mean, if we were doing it currently, then yes, but the points are more scored for what's happening every day, 365 days a year, not in a pinch scenario.
Okay.
In our water main projects, be a hard sell for that to be a helping Situate scenario.
Okay.
I guess a couple of other things, Jason. One is that last year we had this PFAS concern. Is that still a concern? Are you still going to put in that $3.3 million plant? Number one. Number two is, have you factored in the $300,000 of annual additional cost associated with that? And finally, what else are we likely to find in the way of some kind of pollutant that in fact will require still another major redesign or new plant or whatever else that we might have to do? Is all of it, have you got all of the factors figured in at this stage of which you are aware?
All the factors that we're aware of as being potential contaminants, we've taken into account. I mean, we can't be omniscient here, but for everything that's in the pipeline, we're accounting for it. We will be still doing the PFAS project. We're actually, typically, they should have already awarded the SRF monies, but I think the issue they ran into this year is trying to allocate the ARP money into the program, because they are putting a lot of ARP money into the SRF program this year. So typically those are awarded December 31st. It's now 1 month later and it still hasn't been awarded. So we're holding off. We awarded the contract for design, but we haven't heard yet on the loan itself. And the PFAS number at Lily Pond has actually been increasing throughout the year. So it's becoming even closer to the limit that we'd be. We're actually into monthly testing now. Before we were in quarterly testing, given our number. We're now into monthly testing on PFAS at Lily Pond.
And do you know
Is that all the questions, Ralph?
how close are we actually to reaching whatever limit the state or the federal government has placed on PFAS?
We range in the teens right now, Ralph. So anything above 10 requires monthly. Anything above 20, like Elms Meadow got above 20. So 20 is the, if you get above 20, you need to send out letters to the town saying there's PFAS in the water. We have to provide alternate water supply for at-risk members of the population.
Okay.
We haven't gotten, we're not close to 20, but we don't want to get to 20 and not be ready.
Okay. And the source of all this, do you think, is what?
What did you say? Sorry.
The source of whatever phosphate you're now getting. What
It
is
could be anything. We have no idea. No idea.
Well, isn't a lot of it
It's
fertilizer?
forever.
laundry?
It's in. No,
Fertilizer and laundry
it's in.
detergent?
It's in your clothes. It's in your clothes. It's in Starbucks wrappers. It's in everything. Firefighting chemicals. You name it. It's in it. Pretty much. Anything non-stick, anything water resistant has PFAS in it.
Any other questions from the committee? Jason, could I just ask you to circulate the slide that you shared with regards to all the debt service and operating expense and rate revenue and whatnot on it? And then I think there's some questions that are going to require follow-up here, primarily from Ralph and probably need to be addressed by Don with regards to actually having the actuals and seeing those connect through to the forecasts. Was there anything else that we need to follow up on this?
We can do that.
Okay.
I mean, the biggest thing is going to be, like I said, it was the rainiest summer and
Right.
the least amount of water pumped in August in the past 10 years. So I would agree with you, Ralph.
Possibly an outlier.
It wasn't a
Right.
good year as far as the rate study was concerned.
Right.
Yes, I mean, yeah, if global warming happens and part of it is we get a lot of rain.
So Jason, just a word as an aside, and I think most of the committee members have similar experience, right? I mean, we've all looked at many a forecast, and you do your best to set forth the most likely case, right, in a projection. But
Yeah.
I think any forecast we've ever looked at, we probably all could have agreed at the outset that, one thing was certain, and that's that it would be wrong, right? I mean, the reality when it happens will be something different in some way. So, just if the past year was an outlier, that's not a problem. It's actually very informative because it gives you some visibility into, what happens when you have, some low revenue variance in your business. I mean, it's a utility, but it still has variance in it. So I wouldn't be shy about, about what happened in those numbers. It's more important that we understand them and that we make sure that the capital spending and the capital structure that's put in place, give the team at the water department sufficient room to maneuver through those scenarios. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Which is,
Agreed.
We've kind of gone full circle, but it gets back to why I was asking the questions about the total operating and debt service stacked bar relative to the revenue. It feels, feels tight, which may argue for using some retained earnings and not taking on quite so much debt. But we may want the capital cushion. I just don't know. But someone needs to make a thoughtful decision on that trade-off. All right. We're a little bit past 7:40. Unless anyone has any other questions, why don't we let Jason go and just ask to have a follow up with the actual, with the actuals and maybe a discussion with Don in terms of what we expect in the forecast going forward, and perhaps what the trade off would be, spending a little bit of cash in some of these projects just to make sure that the the OpEx stack comes in below the revenue line.
Yep,
Brian,
that's fine.
Host, when you say spend a little extra cash, is that money coming out of the enterprise fund or coming
Comes out of the
of
retained earnings in the enterprise fund. That's correct, Michael.
Okay.
Effectively. You're spending your existing cash balance as opposed to sitting on the cash, which is earning almost nothing, and borrowing incremental debt to pay for the new capex.
Right.
But there's a trade-off there because obviously you want a nice capital cushion. So we just need to think about what that trade-off would be. All right, guys. Why don't we, unless anyone has anything else, why don't we shift over to DPW? Are we good to make the switch?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Hey, Jason.
Mr. Joyce. How are you?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
How y'all doing? Thanks for having me. Just one thing on listening to the end of that, the PFAS is it's not phosphates or anything like that. It's a polyfluoroalkyl substances. I think that's anyway. It's a substance like Jason I think was saying. It's in anything that is non-stick or firefighting or waterproofing on your jackets. So it's kind of an emerging contaminant that's everyone's wrestling with, and it doesn't really go away, but it will come out with granulated activated carbon like your Brita filter or anything like that. So it's different than the phosphates and stuff you see in fertilizers and such. Anyway, I digress. Let's talk about DPW. So I'll try to be brief. I'll just read the list quickly. We have 3 items, really 4 items. The 4th one just being our perennial roads, but the 3 capital equipment items we're looking for are a backhoe for the RTF, replacing our 1986 truck number 4. It's a dump body, and also the 1998 Samsung loader. So with that, I just have a few pictures on a slide. I don't know, Michelle, if you want to give me a sharing ability.
Be all set, Brian.
Thanks. All right, so are you all looking at our Samsung?
Yes.
So again, this is a 1998 front end loader. Dry weather, it's used up the RTF. It does all the handling of the large compost pile up there. In inclement weather like this weekend, it's the primary salt loader at the at our salt barn, loading vehicles as they go out on their routes. This has become, well, this is our top priority, but it has become even more important because this particular unit has failed in the past. Well, it's been failing, but it has failed completely within the past few weeks. The transmission, it's not working. It won't move. If the guys do get it to move, it's just at a crawling speed. So anyway, we've had to temporarily rent a cat loader to do the operation that this one is required to do. So the Samsung from 1998 was, we were hoping it wouldn't fail before we replaced it, but it has. So the unit we're looking to replace it with is similar. It's similar to the unit we have for our frontline highway department. It's the CAT 938, I believe is the model number. And a couple things with the Samsung, it's Japanese model that Samsung, as you know, makes several different things, including TVs, washing machines. They don't make the loader anymore. The parts are hard to come by. And if we did get a transmission, if we were able to find a transmission, again, it's a 1998 unit. If we get a CAT unit, we would have sharing implements. We would be able to share implements with our other machine. I think that's it. I'll open up for discussion and questions on the operation. And if Michelle, if Dan or Carl are in the waiting room, you can let them in for kind of the operating mechanics technical perspective.
Haven't arrived yet. As soon as they do, I'll pop them in.
Okay, sure, thanks.
So Brian, what year is the CAT?
This CAT is, I think it's a 2019 or 20.
Okay, so this is the one we bought, a year or two ago.
Yeah. And this is just a picture from a couple days ago. Obviously,
Okay.
It doesn't have the implements on it.
Okay, so we bought that new, and at the time it was, the one that was up at the RTF had a leaking transmission, was end of life, and the Samsung was our frontline unit at that point, as I recall. So this replaced the Samsung on the front line, bumped the Samsung to the RTF, and we dragged the other one, off to the scrap heap, I guess.
Yeah, and so, sorry, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, it wasn't my impression at the time that that the Samsung was coming off. It was our frontline unit at the time. It wasn't my impression, at least at that moment, that we were going to be replacing it a year or two later. So has it effectively died substantially out of the expected cycle?
So it's been on our list, but we were hoping at the time we got this unit, the transmission problems, we weren't having the transmission problems that we've had subsequent to then, and now it's failed. So they've had, the transmission fluid tested, and it seems to be clutches, components of clutches grinding together. And to replace the transmission in one of these units, you basically disassemble the entire cab off of it, and the transmission is kind of in the articulating middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big project, probably around $50,000, and looking at replacing a transmission in a 1998 unit at
Right.
$50,000, I think it's totaled. It's virtually totaled as far as
Right.
value of it.
Yeah, it's probably not worth 50 grand, even with a working transmission in it. So I get that. I guess I'm just curious. I mean, I wasn't really, maybe others sort of have a different take on this, but I wasn't really expecting to, to see this for a while. And so did this effectively sneak up on us?
Since we bought this one, I would say
Yeah.
yes, the failure and it snuck up,
Okay.
as far as its ability to operate. It was operating. We were planning on operating it.
And now it doesn't, right?
Now it doesn't.
Okay, so that jumps right to number one on your list. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. So it's one of the units that we can't do without, which is why we're renting one right now.
Okay.
So Brian, on the list of all of the vehicles at DPW, I see the Cat being a 1985. There isn't another Caterpillar loader on here? Did it just get missed or?
Yeah, thanks for emailing this out, Ralph, but the 1985, this list needs to be updated. The 85 was what was replaced with the
Oh,
unit
okay.
we're looking at. So we, before the Caterpillar we're looking at the picture of, was that replaced the 1985, and we had the 1998 Samsung. And now this unit's either a 19 or 2020.
I see.
Yeah.
And Brian, is this the unit that we leased?
We did not lease this unit. No, the unit we leased was a heavy haul tractor.
Okay,
So we got 35 years out of the 1985 Cat, and we got 20 years out of the Samsung. Is kind of the moral of the story. Is that?
Yeah, and it's again, we're trying to get a little bit more local with our equipment. I mean, Caterpillar, as you know, it's a long-standing
Yeah.
manufacturer. They're North American. The parts are easy to get.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I apologize for digressing. I mean, I just, in my head, when we replaced the 85 Cat, somewhere around 2020, having gotten 35 years out of it, I thought we were going to see a similar life out of the Samsung, and it turns out we're not going to get it. I mean, it's kind of that simple, right?
Yeah, and I mean, not that you need to do it, but try to do a little research on Samsung loader, and you come up with mostly washing machine. You can't find it. So they've been bought, I think, twice since we purchased the units.
The front loaders versus top loaders.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not going to help us here.
So any other questions on this one? Move on to the next. Ralph's got it.
Yeah.
He's raising his hand.
Yeah, I guess this goes to my continuing concern about the way we use equipment and the way we keep it. Obviously, all of us who go to the RTF see the Samsung machine, and prior to that, I guess we saw the previous one as well. And although I understand that it's used for loading sand and salt, and I understand that's necessary, we also just bought a what I call a skid steerer for that purpose. So one of the things you might think about is, why do we need this level of equipment, which for the most part up there, other than doing the sand and salt, sits there and receives people's metal scrap most of the time, and just sits there and rots, as you know. And as you show on your picture here, it just simply rots out. And although I don't disagree, it probably has a transmission problem. It is odd that we take something of that, for example, if we in fact move the brand new one, the 2021, which we just bought, and we move it up to the RTF, just to have it sit up there seems like a not really justified way to actually spend your money. And there's no cost benefit ratio there whatsoever, as far as I see it. Do you need a piece of equipment up there? Of course you do. And I don't doubt that one second. But do you need to spend $215,000 or whatever the number is? I have to go look to see the exact number. But anyway, something as incredibly high as that for such a trivial use. And I don't want to over trivialize it, but it is pretty simple. That when you walk up there, it's just collecting steel. That's about it, and other aluminum and other materials. So I'd rather say, yeah, you got to replace it with something. I would look around and find a way to replace it with something either more modest or maybe something used, but not necessarily to have a 2020 piece of equipment, brand new, put up at the RTF to do what it's doing now. That really does not feel right to me. I don't disagree, you got to do something, but I don't think it is appropriate to take a very new piece of equipment and use it that way. That's my view of this one. And my continuous view on this is maintain our equipment, make sure it stays in operation for well beyond the 20 years. They should be much longer life pieces of equipment we're getting. Anyway, that's my only comments on that one.
Thanks, Ralph. I will say, and I think it's evident in the next, or one of the requests we'll talk about, after every storm, and if you go up to the garage, all of this is housed. It's not up at the RTF. It's there when folks are going through, but it's housed inside. And the guys do a good job of washing everything down, including the undercarriage after each storm. And the 1986 we'll talk about in a few minutes I think is evident to that. Carl does take good care of his equipment. It is a little different, and I was listening to some of the other discussions about vehicles around town where they don't have a garage to house it, like Elder Affairs and such. But all of our vehicles are washed out pretty regularly, and they're, again, the Samsung failure. It's not a rust. I kind of put this in here just as it's indicative of its age, but
Right.
It's not the.
Those are actually very cosmetic issues.
And
I have a
sorry, go ahead.
question. When I met with Brian and Dan and Carl this week, and we talked about these purchases, and I asked whether it was more could be cost effective to lease. No, Ralph's point, is this the right size machine? I'm going to leave that up to Brian to decide. But I'm just wondering, to the committee, should we be considering leasing and trying to drive down the total cost of ownership that way? Would there be a saving? Should we be considering this?
Michael, what we did in the past was we did a full payout lease, which doesn't really reduce the cost overall, but it just spreads the payments out over time, and at the end you own it.
Mm-hmm. So that takes some pressure off the competition for, each year's capital budget stabilization hit. So
yes and no, because it puts, if you do a deferred payment plan or an installment payment plan, you can't not fund that the next year. So that's already decided for the entire length of the lease, number one. And number two, that comes right off the top of whatever we're appropriated. And then there's less available to distribute. So, I mean, we did that last lease because, we had no choice to get a heavy haul tractor. And we didn't have the money to fund it. And it was really just an alternative to, debt funding it. But I mean, it really was just an issue of spreading the payments. Where we've had better luck with leases is when you get yourself out of the maintenance business, which is what we did with the school buses. Like, that's not driven by cost of capital or, installment funding or anything else. It's not about smoothing the cost of buses. It's about forcing us to turn over our bus fleet when the bumper to bumper warranties expire, so that we're never in the maintenance business. I mean, so we've had success there, and that's why.
and school buses have a shorter lifespan than, say, one
They
of these
do.
front end loaders.
They do, and they also tend to have maintenance issues earlier on. I mean, I don't want to get completely digressed, but the reason it worked there is because we were spending about $15,000 a year to maintain buses that weren't worth $15,000. And now, they were 20, they were 15 years old and they were not passing inspection. And we basically decided to go with new buses perpetually and spend the money on that as opposed to spending the money on, perennial maintenance, keeping buses alive that frankly should have been retired a long time ago. So that it worked there. But if you look at it for a piece of equipment like this, my own personal instinct, and I encourage everyone to share their own view. If you lease this, you're just spreading out the payments. And I don't, and it's just really kind of obfuscating how much we've really spent is my own feeling. I mean, if we need this, we should buy it. We should pay for it.
Okay.
As that we no longer have that money available for something else.
Okay. So then it comes down to Brian making a decision on what is the right machine for the purpose.
So I think it may have been Ralph who mentioned the Bobcat loader. So the bucket size on this is is one of the critical elements of it in loading. Our 10-wheelers, our 6-wheelers and 10-wheelers and trucks that come through. The reach, while the reach on the Bobcat would do it, it's a smaller bucket and you're up over your head kind of dumping. As opposed to this is, your bird's eye view in the shed and looking down kind of on the vehicles that you're loading. So it's a safety issue. Up at the RTF, the main thing in it is the composting, which we're trying to get rid of materials so that we could do it more properly. And this is the unit that, or the Samsung was the unit that turns over that pile. And doing it with a smaller piece of equipment would just make it a lot more labor intensive and it'd be too many man hours.
Brian, let me ask you a question. What is our frontline highway one doing when the RTF one is active?
So this was plowing North Main Street, South Main Street, and
No. I'm talking about when we would actually be turning over the compost, which I assume would not be happening in the middle of a blizzard.
Right.
So on a typical day, look, in a blizzard, you probably had both units out on the roads, right? Because you shut the RTF.
Yeah, one's loading and this one's plowing. Right.
Right. But in a typical day, right? You might be turning out compost and you're not plowing snow. What is the frontline road unit doing on a day when we would actually be turning out compost?
So we kind of separate the RTF from the highway, over behind the Haggerty building. So any of the kind of structures or material handling over on the DPW side, including any of the spoils or the kind of the road grindings. This unit handles that area. So are they used simultaneously? Not
That's really
always.
the question. I mean, we've got two of them, and I can't imagine that we're turning out compost when in the middle of a blizzard. And I can't imagine we're shoveling snow when we're turning out compost. So I'm just trying to understand why we actually have two of them.
Well, for this weekend, as an example, when you need them both. It's. I'll get a better description when we talk about it when you guys go for the vote. But I think it'd be good to get the perspective of our highway foreman. See, how he uses it on a daily basis.
Okay. And so just in order of priority, is this number one of these three?
Yes.
Okay.
If right, so we're renting one right now.
Which suggests you. Okay, and I assume you didn't rent that just because the storm was rolling in. Is that correct? You had already rented it?
We had rented it because of the Samsung failed, and we need it. So we're renting it through the winter.
Okay,
And then, you know, in discussions, we'll have a decision or
okay.
something by then.
So you didn't, okay, so again, you rented it because you felt like you needed to, not because there was a storm coming.
No, yeah, by the time we rented it, the storm wasn't even in the forecast.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, that speaks a lot if you, in terms of sense of need and urgency, if you guys actually took the step to rent one.
Yeah, I mean, in the past couple of months, the guys, you know, they do a lot of the mechanic work up there. They've tried several different things. They've changed out the transmission fluid. They've flushed and bled, you know, the entire, I guess, drivetrain on the Samsung. And without any, it didn't really help much.
Right, but my point is that what they weren't willing to do is actually go to one, right? They
No,
the need around this that caused them to go out and rent a second one. So, okay, that's
we'd be crippled. Yeah.
okay. It's telling. Doesn't totally answer my question as to why two, but it's pretty indicative that there's a reason. Okay. Any other questions on this, or should we move on to the second priority on the request list?
We can move on, in my view.
So, well, I guess second priority would be, I don't have a picture of our old, we have a 1986 International L8000. Again, it's a 1986 truck number 4. It's our dump truck. It's used for plowing, salting, sanding, and it's at its end of life. And basically, it comes down to the body. You know, to Ralph's point, if you don't take care of this unit, has been taken care of because it's what is that, 40?
86, 35 years old. Yeah.
35. So it's approaching, 40 years, but it's, it basically, the body is to the point where it's getting unsafe. They've had to replace some of the floorboards in the cab, and there's not much metal left there.
Is it really just the body, or is it the chassis, the frame?
The chassis, the frame and chassis.
Okay. Okay.
So we're proposing a Mack, a 2024 Mack 42 FR with plow and dump body. Similar, it's a similar style, or something like an F 750. Again, that's the same 6-wheeler. And the price point on this is $240,000 is the ask on that one.
So,
and when we talked with Mike earlier in the week, for his question, we talked about leasing or outright buying it. So we got these figures from the dealer.
okay. I mean, it's just another form of bonding, really. Okay. What I'm trying to process in my head, Brian, we've purchased several dump trucks over the past several years. I haven't gone back and calculated the exact number, but it's several, and I know we have a sizable fleet.
Yep. I'd say that the majority of the ones that we purchased recently are in the F450 range. So those are the ones you kind of see the tree and park guys driving around, and you might see some highway operations. But these bigger units are frontline kind of snow and ice on the main thoroughfares. I don't think in my time we've replaced any of these larger units.
Okay, can you spend a couple of minutes and just walk us through the dump fleet? What, what's in it in terms of groups of different size vehicles? What are their ages and where are we in the replacement cycle?
So I'm just going through the list here.
It's like, I mean, I have Ralph's earlier, newer spreadsheet. The problem is, at least as I read it, I can't tell what any of this stuff is because the descriptions are not.
Well, it's really what they're used for, would help us differentiate.
Right. I mean, I guess you got to recognize you're talking to people where you say an F-550 and it doesn't mean anything to us.
Right. So yeah, I mean the F-450s and 550s are they're smaller dump bodies. If you see tree and park guys around towing trailers, it's in one of those units. These ones here are a 6-wheeler. It's used for catch basin cleaning and I guess hauling pavement mix, or in summertime, and then in the wintertime, it's primarily a heavy piece of equipment for plowing and sanding.
Okay. How many of these? So I know in the last time we purchased a dump truck, there was a discussion that, one group of dump trucks was getting harder to contract. I believe it was the big ones, if I'm not mistaken. And so we ended up getting one of the units that we could no longer contract. Was that not one of these big ones?
Sorry, I was counting here. What was the question, Brian?
Well, the question was the
problem?
last dump truck we replaced, which was probably a year or two ago. There was
That was an F-450, yeah.
So that was a 450. So that,
A 450 or a 550, yeah.
okay. So that's bigger than the 250s, but you're saying it's not as big as this.
No, if you want to compare a 250 and this, it'd be the medium size, I guess, between the 250 and this. Let me see if I have a picture of it.
Okay, so that was not okay. So that last one was not one of the big ones.
Was not, no. So,
So Brian, again, looking at, I know the spreadsheet you said needs some updating, but there is a large International 700, which is a kind of similar truck. That was 2016. Is that still on the list?
Yep, so the International, the Freightliner, again,
The Freightliner's the heavy haul tractor, no? Or is the Freightliner a dump?
it is that's the heavy haul tractor, but size wise, it's of a similar size than it's
Okay.
bigger than the 550. The L8000 and the International 1900.
So we still have a 1996 Ford L8000.
That would be this unit.
And then the International. Well, no, this one's a 1996, and that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. So we've got an 86, a 96.
We're replacing the 1986.
Right. So we've got three of these big ones, is where I'm going.
1, 2, 4.
What's the fourth?
The 700.
I've got an 86 L8000, a 96 L8000, a 99 International 40S. What?
International 1900.
I don't see it. Oh, I see it.
And the International
International
700.
1900. Is that it? The 1988 International 1900?
Right.
So we've got four of these, two of them from the mid 80s.
Correct.
So we're likely to see the International again in a couple of years.
Yes, I would say it's on the short list based on the rest of these units, but again, there's pros and cons to each of them, and
Yeah.
some of the makes and models, and I'm just going back to the 550. Some of the makes and models, seem to fail before other makes and models, so I can't
Yeah.
really speak to that. I'd need to probably have, Carl and Dan who kind
Okay.
of do a lot of the maintenance on it.
But I suspect it's impacting their decision going forward. So we don't have Macs currently, and they're looking for a Mac. Does that mean that they're not happy with the Fords and the Internationals?
No, I think it was a Mac or it was an F, a Ford, a 750.
Okay.
Similar size.
Oh, we've got another International 700. What's that?
That was the fourth. 1, 2.
Okay, now I'm sorry, I'm confused. Now I've got 5. I've got an 86 Ford L8000, an 88 International 1900, a 96 Ford L8000, a 99 International 40S, and then a 2016 International 700.
Stand by.
That 88 International says it's out of service, though.
Oh, I see. Thank you, Francine. So is that retired, Brian? Is that what that means, out of service?
So since the email request and Ralph's list here, I haven't had a chance to sit down and I've been in front of my computer, but I think we need to get you an updated list and maybe even have another column that talks about use.
Right.
Okay. Where I think we're going is, there's a lot of dump trucks in the fleet, and I would just encourage everyone to buy what you think we need going forward, as opposed to what's dying and finding its way out of the fleet. And perhaps our needs are identical to when we bought these trucks in the 1980s, and that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a valid question. If you go up in a summer day when it's sunny out, you'll go in the garage and you'll see these units parked in the garage. But when it comes to snow and ice season, they're irreplaceable.
Right.
And with contractors, we're down 2 or 3 contractors right now. It's, without these units, we wouldn't be able to do what we need to do. So it's when you need them, you need them. And I don't know if we could get into a seasonal rental type agreement. We could probably look at it.
Hey, Brian, when you're,
So we have 5 of these units, truck 2, 3, 4, 5, and number 15.
Those are all the big ones.
2, 3, 4, 5, and 15. And so if you look at the code,
I've got 15 as a, hold on a second.
all right, 15 is an F450. Yeah, so that's not. Again,
Okay.
and going back and forth with Carl, he had looked at this this email in the past few hours, and he said that we need to it needs some editing.
Okay.
But 5 big trucks, he's saying 2, 3, 4, 5, and 15.
Okay.
so Brian, you guys are gonna put a description so we can use layman's terms when we talk about these things? And
Sure, yeah.
would you mind also indicating which one of these are the ones we've replaced the truck? The dumping mechanism on? I know we did a few of those.
You just we replaced just the dump body on them because the chassis was still good.
Yeah, so if you can just let us know which ones those were.
All right, so updating the spreadsheet with the descriptive use column, and ones that have had other capital investments like a dump body, or if we put a transmission or something in it.
So something that would have meaningfully extended the life.
Sure.
We don't need a maintenance log or anything like that. I'm being facetious, but
Okay.
okay. So on to number 3, the backhoe.
So this is a picture of the this is not our unit, but this is we have another unit. This is the backhoe that, again, I don't know if it was confused with the front end load, but this is a backhoe at the RTF. It's used for compaction. We're replacing a 1999 New Holland backhoe with a John Deere 410L. So this is a picture of the John Deere 410. We do have another John Deere. And again, it'd be similar to the Caterpillar where we could share implements.
Is the other John Deere backhoe, which I believe was like a 2015-ish or 2016-ish, is that also a 410?
It is.
Okay. And what does it do as its primary job when the New Holland is up at the RTF?
So the John Deere is on the highway department. It's also used at the cemeteries. Anytime we have to do any excavation in the roadways, the other John Deere's doing that, or catch basin rebuilds, culverts, digging out Treats Pond.
Okay. And so the one at the RTF is literally just compacting the stuff that's in the one dumpster. Is that?
It's for material handling. So it moves metals. It moves any of the heavy fridges or things that need to get moved up there, as well as compaction, so that we can get more volume in our loads and reduce our hauling.
Does it do anything else? I mean, does it get brought into snow removal or?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's our John Deere it's up at the schools clearing sidewalks as we speak, moving piles. So it is used. It's used for plowing. We have a plow implement in front of the bucket.
Yeah.
So
does New Holland ever get pulled out of the RTF to do any road work or snow removal, or is it just basically parked during a storm?
it has it hasn't been used because it's got a pretty bad leak, and it's not a very reliable piece of equipment. It's basically just used on site up there. It is stored inside the garage.
Okay.
The blue garage up at the RTF.
Okay. Okay. So if we buy this, the new one, I assume that it goes to the highway department, and the one at the highway department goes to the RTF. Is that right?
It would be the front line is the highway, and
Right.
the RTF is kind of the backup.
Okay. So, I mean, it begs sort of the same question that Ralph asked about the CAT, right? I mean, you're going to basically take a very new piece of equipment relative to its useful life and sort of relegate it to the RTF role. And I mean, I guess if they're stored inside, that's one thing, but it's just interesting to take a piece of equipment that's only spent a few years on the front line and
I think
market RTF.
again, I think the New Holland doesn't go out only in that it's not it's old and it's not that reliable, but
Okay. So you think if this was there, it would in fact be getting a call of duty in a storm?
I think it would be about plowing. Yeah, I think
Okay.
we'd have a plow in front of it, and it would be doing probably one of the other routes that we're having trouble with contractors getting.
And we've staffed for all these pieces of equipment to plow during a storm, and we're just adding this up, and we've got a lot of equipment. Do we actually have staff to roll all this stuff in a storm for 24 hours straight?
Yeah, we will. I'll say in 6 months from now, we have new staff who are getting licenses.
Okay,
So we're 1 year from now, we have one open position that we're trying to fill. And a lot of the staff that we've hired in the past few months, it's been hard to get, I guess, licensed staff. So we've hired folks who have some skills, but maybe not all the licenses, and we may require them to get it within 6 months or a year
Okay.
of hire.
all right. And so this is number 3 on your list. Is that right?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay. So one of the questions Sam used to always love to ask is what would happen if this request was not to get done, not to get funded this year?
We would probably hope the 99 doesn't die and keep going at the RTF. So
Okay,
I think we would, we would function, and we're functioning right now, but
right.
in the event of a failure,
It sounds like it's getting, you're starting to get a little nervous. It's kind of what it comes down to.
but when things start leaking and
Yeah,
you don't know what's going on inside the transmission of these units. And even if you do a test on kind of the oil, all it does gives you back is traces of metal, which could be anything from like a clutch or a gear.
right. Okay. And same question with regards to the 86 dump.
I'm sorry, what was the question, Brian?
Same question for the 1986 dump truck replacement. The truck.
Oh, what would we do without it?
Yeah, what would, I mean, if something were to get deferred for a year, and I assume it wouldn't be that because that's your second priority, not your third, but I mean, just asking the same question. What happens to that truck in the next 12 months in your opinion?
I'm not sure it would pass inspection. So every year we have an inspector come to the garage and put stickers on our vehicles.
Okay,
And that's everything. They look at the chassis, the body, and the safety of the unit. So I'll have to get a little better explanation on that from probably Carl, Dan, and Boyd.
okay. All right. Yeah, look, three important pieces of equipment. All the jobs that this team does are important up there. But 3 of them in a year adds up, obviously. So we just don't know sort of how the totals are going to add up relative to what we're actually going to have available to appropriate to the department. So that pieces of the question. It's not one of skepticism or lack of urgency. It's just
No, not taken as such. I know it's the perennial, just $5 million of requests with $2 million or $1 million of budget. So,
right.
but yeah, in that order, you said them the loader. I mean,
Okay.
If we don't get that unit, we're going to continue renting, and I'd hate to.
Yeah, that makes no sense. Okay.
So
All right.
the last and final thing was just
Can I ask some questions here?
sure.
Please.
Okay, right. First, a compliment first. In a very tough snowstorm, I think you guys did a great job. That's number one. Everywhere we look, I saw the streets were in great shape. I don't know whether the brine made a difference, but certainly North and South Main Street looked terrific. So does Atlantic Ave. So a compliment to everybody for the work in a very tough storm. They did a really good job. That's number one. I guess with regard to the backhoe, we did allow a purchase of a compactor, hydraulic compactor for all of the paper. Is that ever been installed? Because obviously one of the major things this backhoe is used for is trying to compact all of that paper material. Do we have that compactor?
Yeah, the compactor was put in the building this past fall. Just recently, we still need to do some framing and we're gonna resheet those buildings probably in the spring when lumber prices come down, hopefully. But yeah, the backhoe it's not just the paper, it's the it's the trash, and it's also the C&D. So the guys were actually doing too much compacting, and they got a complaint from the hauler that the weight of the trailers were too much, so we had to lighten off. But it's compaction of all the open trailers, not just the paper.
Okay. Then the other one, as I kind of try to sort out in my mind, what would I do if I were in your shoes and had limited money? I try to ask myself, how could I combine somehow or other the functions that you have for the backhoe together with the front end loader? Simply because it seems to me that they're similar enough. I know they're not the same. I know the size of the front end loader is substantially greater, and climbing that mountain of compost is quite an issue. Nevertheless, is there some way we can actually reduce the number of pieces of equipment, but make one more generally useful? And that's just a broad comment. If not possible, it's not possible. But trying to ask how do you, because of the need for maintenance, the cost of having these pieces of equipment, and of course, taking a relatively new piece of equipment, another new backhoe, and putting it back up with the RTF just doesn't, again, very much like the front end loader, doesn't feel like the right thing to me. But anyway, those are my comments. You don't need to answer, but broadly, that's how I look at this. So.
I will just say one thing on the function of the two of them. So that the front end loader is obviously just the bucket in the front, and it handles large quantities of material, moving material. The backhoe obviously has the hoe on the back, and it has the ability to to hammer down on stuff where you don't have that on the front end loader. So the backhoe is like a small front end loader with the extra implement at the back. So you couldn't use the loader for compaction, I guess is what I'm getting at. But yeah, fair questions.
Michael, Susan, Francine, any other questions on this?
Not from here. I'll be offline for about 5 minutes. Be right back.
Okay. We still have a quorum.
No, my question was just what Ralph was asking.
Okay.
Is there any way to better utilize fewer assets for multiple projects or uses?
Okay, well, if that's it on the moving pieces of equipment, we should probably shift gear and quickly cover the roads. What's on your agenda for the next year?
So a lot of the stuff that Jason, we try to get utilities taken care of in the roads, 1 or 2 years prior to paving them. Our short list has been Elm Street. There's still some decisions to be made on design and other things, but the utilities have been replaced out there, the gas, the water just recently. So we're ready to pave once, I guess, that final design is good to go. And then that paving will continue up around Margin and all the way over to Atlantic and Whitehead Road. If you go that way, it's in pretty rough shape. South Main Street is also on the short list. However, there's a lot of questions still on that with relative to sewer. Again, if we were going to get the utilities done, the sewer needs to be installed prior to it. And just in general, so the funding for this, we have 37 miles of public road in town and 13 miles of private. So we try to get our public roads paved every 20 years, roughly. So we protect our roads for 10 years from excavation by, once we pave them, we have a strict 5-year moratorium on no excavations. And then from years 6 to 10, we have an opening fee kind of in the way to dissuade folks from making cuts in the road. And then really from years 10 to 20, you're kind of talking about paving it and prioritizing on, getting it done. We've been fortunate in town with the Little Harbor project that a lot of the public and private roads were paved all around, Little Harbor and the roads off of it. And we're at the point where those roads are starting to show some age. There've been some utility on it, utility cuts on it. So we've been working with National Grid, working with water and sewer, try to get the utilities done. And then really when we make the capital investment in the roads, try to protect them from getting damaged again. So the short list is always moving because of things like Elm Street and South Main Street. We also have Doane, Church, some of the hills up by Oak Street, Hill Street, Bancroft. So there's basically this number helps fund almost 1.5 miles, 2 miles of road we should be doing each year. We've been fortunate recently that, well, I wouldn't call it fortunate, but National Grid came in and they're trying to replace a lot of their older mains, the coated steel. And so Beach Street and Jerusalem Road that was dug up, we're requiring them, because those roads were in pretty good shape, they own curb to curb paving. So they're funding the paving, curb to curb paving of those. So it's not coming out of our capital fund. Also Sawyer Street was a little bit older, so they put money towards that. It's not curb to curb, but it'll reduce the paving of Sawyer Street significantly.
Okay. But for this year, so that's a helpful sort of overview, but for the next, for the fiscal 23 road program, what do you see in it? It's not that whole list, obviously, or even close to it. It's a couple of stretches, right?
So again,
I assume it's Elm.
but we have Beach Street, Jerusalem Road, Sawyer Street. We're doing the sidewalk from Fair Oaks down to 3A. And then if Cook Estates need to install sewer, they'll do that in the short term, and then we'll probably pave that in fiscal 23, hopefully. So it's kind of a moving target based on utilities, but we need to hit that 1.5 miles per year. Beechwood Street is on the short list. Mill Lane. Again, I said Church, Doane.
Okay. So is the answer that we don't know yet what's in the fiscal 23 paving program? Is that sort of the bottom line?
Yeah, well, we don't know. We have quotes on all these streets that are on our short list, but we don't pull the trigger until, the moving target has stopped moving.
Okay. But the ones that Grid is paying for, that's just a matter of when those get done and paid for. It's not really a budgeting issue, right?
Right.
Okay. So there's a handful of them on this list that aren't even ours in terms of a ticket. And then, okay, there's a handful that are. Okay. And I assume if Elm Street ever got resolved, that would move to the top of the list. Is that a reasonable assumption?
Yes.
Okay.
And, I should mention Atlantic Avenue. I know it was on Jason's short list. So Atlantic Avenue from the bridge to, I think Nichols was on there.
I assume you wouldn't want to do that until they replace the water main, right?
Correct.
And I'm sorry, what was the cost? What's the price tag for this?
So again, this is kind of funding our road program. So 2 miles of road is roughly 700,000. Again, each road is different based on the number of castings and width and such, sidewalks, curbing. But roughly 700,000 is what we should be doing per year. We get last year we got 210,000 from Chapter 90. Capital budget has been kicking in generously, probably 300, sometimes 250, $300,000 a year. So we're still short funding our 20-year cycle, but when we get National Grid to pave some roads, and I think it helps, bridge that gap. So again, this 300,000 is just to keep us funded, depending on, it's not based on a particular road. It's basically 1.5 miles to 2 miles per road per year, and funding that.
Thank you.
Ralph?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Obviously, when National Grid did all of the natural gas lines, they really ripped up an awful lot of roads in town, and obviously Sawyer Street, Beach Street. I don't know, it's hard to even name, even South Main Street and so on. However, they've been able to come back with a very successful, rather what I call a paving system, which actually only really extends for a little bit beyond the actual limits of their trenches. And those roads have been actually very good. Almost everywhere they've done those, they've been very good. Any reason we can't get them to do more of those and more frequently? Because they're obviously very successful projects, as it turns out, once they do them. If you go up, say, at South Main Street, for example, and you walk up and down that street, or even parts of Jerusalem Road, and you look at the way they've done that paving, even at the causeway on Jerusalem, on Atlantic Ave, that paving is gorgeous. I mean, where they have done the work has been great. So I don't know if they can do more of it. That's actually helpful in the short term, for sure.
No, that's it's a good point. So what that is they usually do, they do the trenching, then they pave it. We let it settle over a winter, and then they come back in the spring and they do a mill and overlay.
Right.
So if the trench, say, is 12 inches or 18 inches, they'll mill beyond that, a foot either side or better, and then they'll do an overlay. So
Right.
basically you have kind of a section of pavement that bridges the trench, and it helps with settlement there. So that's what they did on South Main Street. And if either they do that or they provide mitigation in the way of curb to curb. If there's a street that's, what we've come to negotiate with them is, if something's less than 10 years old and you're coming to us to do utility work, you own curb to curb, and generally they'll agree with that. But if they give us the funding for curb to curb, they won't come back in the spring and do the mill and overlay. They'll wait for us to go and pave the whole street. And that's the situation in Sawyer Street. So you're right. If you go down South Main Street, the trench looks great with that mill and overlay. If you go to Sawyer Street, it was just a patch over the trench, and it's terrible.
Right. Yeah. The other comment, and you have probably nothing to do with this, but I was, as you probably know, extremely upset about the fact that some of the Chapter 90 money would be moved over to consultants. And I don't know, you probably don't even want to comment on it, but the vote of the selectmen about 3 or 4 weeks ago was to take $200,000 and hand it over to somebody who was just doing a simple design of Elm Street. And it just seemed to me to be a terrible waste of Chapter 90 money, which is desperately needed to do these roads. I was really upset about that whole thing. We may have altered that some, but I'm not sure. I think that vote is coming up again. We may spend all that Chapter 90 money on things that really you guys could do yourselves. You don't need a very expensive Weston Sampson consultant for that purpose. But anyway, that's personal view on that, but I'm pretty sure I wouldn't spend money that way. So
Yeah. So since that meeting, I think your comments, Ralph, we're Lauren and Jason and I've been called in. We're doing to see what design we can do in-house. And
okay.
Obviously there's we have AutoCAD probably 3 or 4 years old on my computer. There are limitations on an in-house design and obviously a consultant design, but it's a fair point. I don't like spending consultant money when we have the expertise in-house.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on this? Michael, Francine, Susan?
Just to Ralph's point, and would maybe push us off to some other special meeting. But we have sent letters to the select board in the past, which were not handled well. But this topic seems to be relevant to the Capital Budget Committee's mission or role. And I do think that we ought to be drafting some kind of statement asking the select board to more strongly consider saving that Chapter 90 money and using in-house sources. So I just want to make that statement.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mike. We should do something. We should do a letter. Yeah.
So, let me just expand on the in-house versus consultant. So that obviously conceptual design and kind of, you know, function and operations, we can do all those designs in-house, but, you know, the survey and kind of the drafting concept and things that that a consultant can do, I think that's where our limitations are in houses. I wouldn't say it kind of the idea and perspective or engineering perspective of what can be constructed or not, or what's good or not. I think we could do that, but it's really coming with a full bid set of design drawings. That's beyond the scope of what we can do in-house. You know, we could plot, but you know, developing those plans is probably more. We could do the schematic design, but when you do the design development and then the bid drawings, that's probably needs to be done with a consultant.
What did we use for a consultant on the Town Common project?
So we had the schematic design, again, we did that in-house, and I think Cavanaro did the drawings for us, the survey and the drawings.
Okay. Okay, so when you say a consultant, you mean it could be someone like Cavanaro?
Right, depending if you have a schematic design with the ideas pretty well fleshed out, and they're just going out doing survey and putting utilities and cross sections and everything on paper so that a contractor can take it and bid on it, then yeah, a Cavanaro could do that. But if it's a full schematic design development, Elm Street from, you know, A to Z, I think the concept that, or the proposal you saw was from Weston and Sampson. I think it was for basically everything.
And more. Okay. Okay, I think that, look, I just, you know, without overstepping, I think the goal on my hope for Elm Street is that we can somehow find a way to actually scope that project in a price range where people would actually allow it to happen. And I think there are numbers where it will literally stop, you know, dead in its tracks when people react to the number relative to, you know, what can actually be achieved. So I think that's the concern. And I'll stop there for.
No, it's a fair point. It's a big number. When I saw it, you know, you think of what you can, what streets you can pave or parts of streets you can pave with that money. I
think it's a number. It's a number that I suspect would just never get done. And so I hesitate to spend, you know, the consulting number that I saw on a project number that would probably never get done. I think it's important to come at this, you know, with just an immense amount of control and direction on, you know, what people are willing to do, as opposed to just handing it to the consultants and letting them run the project to whatever number they see fit.
Yeah, and just you know, this concept, it kind of, we were ready to and I think Ralph was probably, he had mentioned some of the quotes. We were ready to pave this a couple of years ago. And then the concept of, the harbor redevelopment and kind of a corridor study came out. So, from a DPW perspective, I just want to get the roads paved so that they're smooth and drivable and safe. And it really gets into kind of the planning board and others on, concepts of connectivity and the harbor. And, you have, there's multiple groups who have some stake in this. And we're kind of the ones who pull the levers at the end once the decisions are made.
Right. Fair enough. We'll leave it on that note. Unless anyone else has anything further, they want any further questions. All right. I know Nick's been waiting patiently. Why don't we let Mr. Joyce enjoy what's left of his evening and move on to facilities.
Thanks, everybody. I'll stop
Thank you.
there. Oh, wait, I'm sticking around for Nick. I forgot.
Oh, cool. There certainly is one item on this list that's definitely DPW overlap. We can handle that first or in order, but that I was just thinking about the driveway, the access road and the sidewalk up at the high school. But we can do it in any order you gentlemen like.
That'd be fine by me. That's definitely Brian's forte there.
Would it be helpful if I shared my screen with the capital requests from the schools so you can see what they're?
Yeah, I'm looking for that list. If you could bring it up, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so we're just going to go through the facilities related stuff here where either Nick or Brian have the implementation. And I think we're really just focused on, on scope, physical condition, whatever being replaced, and sort of confidence intervals around the costs.
Yep.
Ultimately the schools, when we go through the overall school's requests, can prioritize this list, along with the other school requests that are here that are much more academic and focused and probably not something you guys want to spend any time on this evening.
Yeah. And just to preface the items that we have to do with, these were ideas that were brought to my attention from the schools. So
Right.
they're not necessarily things that I found. I'm just assisting with the logistics and
Okay.
all that. So we can start, the wet ceiling tiles. I believe Susan's actually going to be taking that off the list because that was unknown to them as a operational thing that we do every year.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. They just need a desk.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Fair enough. No, that's
the automatic window shades. So I think we've talked about this for a few years now.
Yeah.
Just briefly. The premise is at Osgood, their gym has windows on the second floor looking into the gym. So in regards to safety, they're requesting electric window shades that would operate off of a switch, or we're discussing kind of having like a panic button type thing installed in the
Right.
principal's office. So that with one button, all the window shades can automatically lower to create a safe place for shelter in place. So I think that's the general premise. This cost includes the installation of all the shades, running of the control wires, and the electrical needs to get it done.
Okay. And I assume that these are just sort of blackout shades. They're not security
Correct. It's
capable in any way. Is
purely
that
for visibility, not physical
Okay.
protection. The reason they need to be automatic is that obviously they'd be mounted on the inside of the gym, so they're just in an unreachable spot, but in a way that they can't be moved from the second floor. So just a little bit of a challenge to get.
Nick, why couldn't we just use some sort of opaque window up there? So you
I
can't see
brought that
anything?
up because they don't want it to be invisible at all times.
What does that mean?
If we put something opaque, it would just, you wouldn't have a window anymore, I guess.
Okay, well, let me rephrase that. Something like a bathroom window that has frosting on it,
Yes,
so that the light passes through, but no one can see in it. A privacy glass of some kind.
yeah,
Why electric shades?
I
And what is
brought
the,
that idea up.
So if I
Um,
could just add something. So this is from an interior hallway. This is not exterior light. It's from an interior hallway on the second floor.
Correct.
If you're walking in the interior hallway, you can look down into the gym through these fixed light glasses. And
Yeah, so there's no natural light coming in these windows. It's just a hallway to the gym.
then again, why not, wall board it over? I mean, why spend $50,000 on safety automatic window shades?
That I cannot answer.
Yeah.
The schools can answer that. That was my idea, but they wanted it to be or still have their windows, but this.
Okay,
so.
fair enough, Nick. Thank you. I think we need the school committee to weigh in on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna weigh
50,000.
on,
A lot
Michael,
of money.
they're gonna weigh on, on each and every one of them. Nick is just walking through really,
What it would take on our end, yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
I-
so if we have questions that are really for the school committee, we should hold them and not hit you with them, Nick. You didn't wear a
Correct.
helmet tonight.
Correct.
Okay.
Next, that I'd be involved with, Cove Base in the gym entryway. So we did a pretty extensive kind of refurbishing with a mixture of in-house and operational budget last year for painting and kind of getting that very dated area back up to snuff. And they want to continue that with some light flooring and cove base in that area.
And is there any other option that doesn't cost anywhere near $15,000 to accomplish the same thing?
I mean, most of the school has the cove base. It's not abnormal. I think it would kind of honestly look pretty bad if we didn't have anything and it was just the CMU block right down to the floor.
And what is CMU block?
Just, like cinder block walls.
Okay, all right.
So it's, it's just like a baseboard. It's decorative, ties everything in.
Okay, decorative though.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So retile all classrooms at Deer Hill. This is a continuation of the project we did, was it last year? Time is just kind of fleeting. So we did all the hallways in Deer Hill with the new MCT tile instead of the VCT, which is enabling us to not have to use stripper or wax anymore. We've been getting some really good feedback on the floor the past year, and this would be totally finishing the school with the MCT tile, which would in turn eliminate the use of any stripper or wax going forward. So some really great long-term savings and man hours, because custodians spend the bulk of the summer doing that. So their time can be used elsewhere.
How many years do you think it would take for us to recoup the 100,000 in savings?
I'd have to see how much they spend on stripper wax, and then just kind of, I don't do any of that purchasing. The schools and the custodians do all that.
Okay,
But just man hours alone, honestly, I think that would be paid back probably 10, 12 years, I would imagine.
okay. That helps, thank you.
Uh,
So Nick, you think we're burning fully loaded just $10,000 a year in man hours to buff the floors? I was just instinctively thinking it was a higher number than that.
it could very well be. I'm sure Susan could dig deeper into how many custodians they have on a daily basis. They're doing this pretty much all day, every day during the summer. So,
Right. That's why I was kind of coming up with a higher number.
yeah. So it could very well be. I was being very conservative.
Yeah, where I'm going with this is I don't know, just instinctively, it wouldn't surprise me if it's a lot shorter than 10 years.
It probably could be, honestly. I just don't know the exact answer to
Okay.
all that info. So the next one's the replacing the field lights at the high school. So they use traditional lamps and ballasts over there right now. We want to upgrade those to LED. 60,000 is actually an excellent price when you consider if we have to do any light replacements, we have to hire an electrician to come in, and the boom lift rental alone is over $3,000 a day. So if we have any significant work to do, we're spending anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 to replace bulbs and ballasts. This would eliminate that on a yearly basis.
How frequently do we change lights in the course of a year, and how much do you think we've spent, say, in the last 5 on replacing field lights?
We've been averaging, or we try to average doing replacements once a year.
All of them or some of them?
Just some of them. If we did all of them, we'd probably end up spending $25,000 on all the parts. So that's kind of a throwaway if we did that. But we try to wait until we have enough out that it makes sense. Like, we're not going to be doing this if we have just 2 out. I stay in contact with Steve Rotundi, and he has some MIAA kind of guidelines to go by with when we're at a level of light that we need to do it. So we try to hold off until that time and do it once a year. Obviously things happen. I know the first year that I started, we believe there was a lightning strike on one. And I mean, that was probably $12,000 worth of repairs right there.
But typically, just replacing, is it a failed light at the end of its life?
Yeah, usually either that or a bad ballast, or there's a few things that can go wrong with it. Fuses, inline fuses. Going to LED also would totally remove ballast, fuse, and everything, because it would be a direct line voltage right to the fixture. So it eliminates a lot of potential snags throughout a season.
Right. Could this be done in phases?
No, if they switch the lights, you need to do all at once, just because it's actually pretty interesting. When they design it, a firm designs what direction all the lights have to be pointed, and they actually attach lasers to the lights so they maintain correct lighting at different heights on the field and different directions on the field. So it's a very very scientific process that they go through with MIAA and the lighting contractor.
Okay. And just what's your ballpark on how much we've spent over the last 5 years on forgetting the lightning strike, but just, you know,
Yeah.
bill, ballast, fuse, whatever.
Well, let's just call it $8,000 a year. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So the next one that would involve me, scoreboard is Steve Rotundi, and the locker mechanisms are just the schools, I guess. I'm not 100% sure. We actually don't deal with the lockers, the custodians do.
Okay.
So install the AC heater split for the middle school health clinic. So this space was the teacher's room in the middle school prior to last year. And they have since made it into the nurse's office. So it's a space that was not designed for what they're trying to do. And unfortunately, this isn't a straight just put a mini split in, because they do need a outside air source. So it's a little more involved because we need to do some air ducting with exhaust and intake. And because it's the health clinic, we want to make sure that they're getting the air changes they needed, and it's the kind of equipment that they need in there. So that's roughly what we're trying to do.
In your view, is this the only room that can serve this purpose for the nurse's office, or are there other spaces there?
In the middle school, it really is actually. They don't have much over there, and this was part of their splitting of the middle school and high school, because prior to this, middle school students would have to walk all the way to the nurse's office in the high school to go to the nurse, which is a long ways away.
Okay, thanks.
So Nick, even with the increased complexity on this, the number's still 20K?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. If it was just a mini, it'd be much less than this.
Okay.
So that's due to the air issues.
Okay.
This next one, I know we looked at this when we walked. Same thing. This is it's using a bathroom that's in this nurse's office. They have two. So what they want to do is make one of them into a single use bathroom, which means that we have to do some demo on an existing hallway wall and put a door in and block the other door up that goes to the nurse's office.
So it's going to open onto the hallway as opposed to opening into the nurse's office. So
Correct. Yeah.
so people can use this without actually coming into the nurse's office.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And I was actually kind of shocked at I started getting pricing, and it's pretty significant, honestly. I didn't think it was going to be this much, but yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of masonry to be done. There's a lot of moving of electrical. So,
Nick, are there any other options rather than resorting to this degree of renovation?
if this is, so they can explain more as to the reasoning they want this.
But from your knowledge of the building, are there other options to solve the problem?
Nothing cheaper, because I mean, if we're talking about adding a single-use bathroom to that side of the building, I mean, that would be an immense amount of work and money.
Right. Are there any other single-use bathrooms in that building anywhere?
The only one is in the gym lobby.
Okay.
So they'd have to walk all the way from the middle school to there, which is what they do now, if that's the case.
Okay,
And they do have their specific reasons for why they want this in our new age, so.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
That should be it for my particular things. And then it's just the asphalt road and sidewalks.
Yep. That, I'm just looking at this. Okay, so the scoreboard is, and the PA are not you, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, I believe,
and the locker mechanisms are not you.
no,
Okay,
yeah, I think PA might be IT actually.
okay. Yeah, that probably makes sense.
And I'm not sure of their prioritization on all these either, so.
Okay, do we still have Brian? There you are. Nick, was there anything else on your list, or are we all set?
That should be it, I believe, unless they
Okay,
came
all
up with something and didn't tell me, so.
right. Any members of the committee have any questions on anything that Nick has walked us through here? Further questions?
Good, thank you.
No problem.
All right. Which I guess the last item on here is the asphalt road and the sidewalk.
Yeah, so again, I just wanted to mention that, so these were put forward by the schools, obviously, without.
Yeah.
So they're not requests from facilities at DPW, but I'm
Understood.
not really certain.
But I'm guessing the implementation lands in your lap. Is that fair?
That is very fair, yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm only guessing on locations on this because it's not as descriptive, I guess it needs to. So asphalt road from Pond Street needs to be resurfaced. I'm guessing that is the first road that goes up towards Alumni
Correct.
Field to the circle.
Yep.
And $80,000. Again, we'll have to get a new quote from a contractor, but it's roughly, that sounds about right. Sidewalk and curbing on entry road to, I don't know if it's the same entry road or if they're talking about the horseshoe that's around the middle.
No, it is the same entry road, and the sidewalk there has been really roughed up, apparently by some piece of equipment. My guess is snow removal. I mean, it's sort of the edge of it's just ripped to pieces, and then the rest of it is suffered salt infiltration once it was all opened up.
Yeah. So that's all concrete. It's cast in place concrete curbing and cast in place concrete sidewalk. So that doesn't hold up well, I guess, to chipping on plows, and it doesn't hold up as opposed to like a granite curb.
Right.
Or again, salt does a number on concrete versus like bituminous black asphalt concrete. So there's a number of different options you can do on the curbing. If they want to keep it as concrete, it's a lot more money than it would be as, if it were bituminous, it'd be a lot cheaper. And if we were going to do a sidewalk up there, I would also like to see the connection. There should be a connection from Pond Street to the sidewalk that goes up to Alumni. There's about a 200-foot gap that's, for some reason, it wasn't constructed when they built the schools. And that would require a little bit of permitting with Concom because there is a wetlands and a stream that goes along that, parallel to that sidewalk, and it goes under the road there.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've got extend the sidewalk to Pond Street on their list, but I don't think they necessarily have to replace the existing sidewalk on their list, which still needs to be, ultimately agreed and funded. Okay, Brian, how much work to get through Concom to extend this down?
Well, no, I don't think it's worthwhile. I don't think it's, it's extremely onerous.
Okay.
Well, I can't speak for the Concom. We tried to do Sawyer Street sidewalk and it took several months of deliberation. So I'd say it's not, I think that there's merit in doing the sidewalk there, and I think there's mitigation we would probably
Okay.
need to do.
So it could take a couple of months. And okay.
Is it level though? I don't know down at the Pond Street entrance, only because I'm there every day, that it looks that level.
No, you would need to, that's a good point. You would need to do some filling and some leveling. There is, if you see the kids getting out of school, they do walk they walk down the shoulder.
Yeah.
Where it is. So in order to make it, a 5-foot sidewalk, you would need to do some filling on the edge and probably need to do some sort of either riprap treatment before it goes down into the brook area. And I'm sure if we were doing a pervious surface, on Sawyer Street, we had to do pervious pavement, and I suppose we could do that here too.
Good. It doesn't really work well on grade. Sort of defeats the purpose, but in there's clearly quite a bit of grade here. Okay. And in terms of configuration, part of the reason that this didn't get funded or proceed last year is because no one really had put any thought into how to make sure that, whatever we put in doesn't just get destroyed again by plows. I don't think anybody wants to spend a few $100,000 on the sidewalk and then have it, get shredded again. So any thoughts or suggestions on that? I mean, did I hear that the granite holds up better and perhaps bituminous is more resistant to salt? I mean, is that the direction we should be going here versus just a pour in place concrete? Or should we be putting...
There's a lot of aesthetic, I guess, preferences around the schools, but bituminous concrete or bituminous walking surface holds up better to salt than the concrete pads. It's a lot cheaper to install, and granite does hold up better than it does chip less. It's a harder substance than a concrete poured curb.
Right.
And that area, just by nature of the snow removal that needs to happen, that curb is going to get run with a plow just to get the road width up there. And bituminous curbing does not hold up well.
Right.
So I think a lot of areas they've done, I've seen, on long stretches, like if you went from Pond Street all the way up to the Circle, you could do bituminous, and then when you get to kind of an interesting area, maybe the entrance, you transition into a concrete sidewalk, so it's
Right.
aesthetic. And again, I'm not a landscape architect, but I've seen a lot of that.
Right.
I think Ralph was involved in the village. A lot of that's down there. There's bituminous sidewalks, and then when you get to a corner, transitions into something a little more interesting, like brick or stuff like that.
Right.
I'm not proposing brick, by the way.
No, I hear you. I mean, look, aesthetic preferences aside, what's certainly unaesthetic is a destroyed sidewalk. So it seems kind of silly to put in place a sidewalk that we know is going to get destroyed and become unaesthetic. Okay. Brian, is there anything we could do in terms of bollards or a foot rail or something like that to keep the plows off it?
Nothing, nothing operational though. Really, it's, we instruct drivers to go off it, but we have a couple of contractors. We have new contractors, and sometimes contractors do damage. But a regular plow running up the curb on concrete it chips really easily,
Right.
Especially when it gets older. I mean,
Right.
Once you have a crack, you have moisture intrusion, and then you start getting the freeze and thaw. You don't get that in granite. You might get a chip at a joint or something like that, but it's going to hold up multiple times longer than a concrete sidewalk. One other thing that's not on here, but it probably we'll have to consider in the next few years, so all those, the lights that are around the parking lot and along these streets, those are all cast in place concrete or maybe precast, but those are in rough shape. If you go up there and do some soundings on it, there's a lot of hollow and spalling and some cracking in there. So that's going to be a capital thing, I think, that should be brought up in the next couple of years.
Okay.
It's different than this. I'm just bringing it up because it's concrete.
Got it. Okay. But what I think I hear you saying is there's no way to mark this with little reflective, markers or anything like that to keep people off it. Granite, the toughest curb, and bituminous is probably the best side, the longest lasting sidewalk material. Is that a decent summary?
I wouldn't say the longest. Yeah, I'd say it lasts longer with the salt, but it's also cheaper. So if you need to replace it, you could do it.
Got it.
Almost within the operating budget.
Okay.
One thing, Brian, I just want to keep in mind too, or have us keep in mind, is that the schools, as I understand, are going to be replacing the track and field,
Yes.
the track and turf. So
Yeah.
just the timing of doing a curb before they have trucks, come and ripping that up.
Yeah.
I think we just want to make sure that they're being thoughtful about this, given their history. And that's all I'll say.
No, it's a fair point. I mean, that should all be done before any of the sidewalks get done. I'd also like to look at, if you're going to consider this, look at the rest of the school area. We try to do this in roads where you get the entirety of the road. I hate to see, a piece of a road and then it makes the rest of it look terrible, or it's
Right.
Then you're coming back to do another piece of the same road. Even though it's a bigger nut, sometimes it's better to do something in its entirety, and you have that new for,
So Brian, to that end, if the rest of the roads up there, the lots or whatever you want to call them, are not in terrible shape, and I'm saying if, because I haven't looked at them, maybe they are in terrible shape and they all need replaced. But assuming they're not, it really is just the access road, right? Up to the field. My understanding is it really, the issue is concentrated around a single drain in the middle of the road. To repeat the question that Ralph has asked in the past, can we not just hot patch that in a way that it would actually hold for a couple of years and present better until, all of the roads up there need to be replaced?
Yeah, I mean, a mill and overlay of a section it's definitely feasible and it'll hold up. Then the joints and the sections outside of that will probably deteriorate first. But again, this is not. I'll get quotes for. I can talk to our contractor about getting quotes for the entirety of it, and then the sections that we're talking about.
Okay.
But I would. Again, I'll defer to the schools on the nature of their request and kind of why and where.
My understanding is that there's one drain that will rattle your fillings loose if you hit it. And the rest of the road is, at least as I understand, is in pretty decent shape. Ralph, I think you've walked the area recently, no? We lost Ralph.
Looks like it.
I think we've lost Ralph. Okay. Well, that's fair. It's late. Brian, I think you're going to find this exactly one spot in that entire road that's in bad shape.
Yeah, it's not. We could definitely do patchings of areas. That's definitely feasible. It's not. It's just again, I don't want to cut apart their request without knowing
Fair enough.
the full nature of it.
Okay. All right. If you could just, without expressing a view, if you could just determine the feasibility of the patch, that would be helpful. And if it's going to come out to the same cost as replacing the whole road, obviously we replace the whole road. But I think it's important to know the two alternatives. And then we will certainly look to the school to explain why we need one versus the other. Okay, I think that's it. Any other questions from any of the committee members?
No.
All right. Then let's call it a wrap with regards to DPW and facilities. Nick, Brian, thank you so much for your time and your patience.
Thank you, everybody.
And thanks
Thank
for the
you.
great work. It makes a tricky job a lot easier.
Thanks.
And capital budget members, if we could just stick for minutes, I'd like to do two things. First of all, if everyone's had a chance to review the minutes from December that Michael Dick had circulated, I mean, if we're in a position, I'd certainly, entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll move that we accept the minutes. Give me the date again.
Yeah, I'm just looking for that myself. Bear with me.
12/6, I think.
That was my recollection. It was December 6th, but hold on.
Yep.
I guess the first question is, has everyone had a chance to review them? Okay, so we're in a position to do this. So Michael, you've moved?
I move that we accept the minutes for December 6th.
Great. Anyone, would anyone like to second?
Second.
Susan, that's a second?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Let's do a roll call vote. All in favor, Michael Dick,
Michael Dick, aye.
Susan Franklin,
Aye.
Francine Lyons,
Francine Lyons, aye.
and Brian Host, aye. So it's 4-0 approved. And the last item of business is, you've all received an email from Sam regarding his ability to attend these meetings on a go-forward basis. And
I did not receive that email.
okay, so I will forward that to you as soon as we drop off. But Sam's working through a health issue and has suggested that it would be appropriate for him to resign from the committee. And certainly all of us are wishing and hoping the very best for him in this. But I think we also need to be cognizant of where we are in the cycle relative to any realistic hope of pulling anybody in to be a fifth member on the committee. I think it's just probably unrealistic. I mean, it's a troika appointment. Those things take time. That's assuming that you had a perfect candidate this very moment, which I'm not sure we're in that position. So a few things. First of all, if everyone could start thinking proactively about who you think might be a good fit for this committee and a good addition to this committee, we should start talking to people and hopefully trying to attract the right talent to complement the great group that we already have. And secondly, I think it does put a bit more pressure on us just to make sure that we have quorums. I don't think we've ever ran a meeting with only 3 people. If we have in the 6 or 7 years that I've been on the committee, it's probably only happened a few times. I can't even remember. So we've had great attendance in the past. This isn't any comment otherwise, but I do think we need to make sure that we have at least 3 people on our meetings, as we go forward through the rest of the cycle. So for the next several weeks, I would say you should assume there will be a meeting each Monday, unless people, chime in here at this moment and suggest we should be doing something different. But I think the goal is to get through all the presentations of all the requests from all the departments as quickly as possible, so we know exactly what we're dealing with. And then we need to have conversations with Don and Chris about how much money, is actually going to be available to distribute to the departments, and then sort that out. So I would, we're way past halfway in terms of the first pass. We've got a bunch of follow-up items that we've given people, but at this point we need to hear from schools directly, IT, Harbor, and sewer. Okay, so we're absolutely through more than half the requests at this point. So I feel good about the progress we've made the past 2 weeks. And I think that, we should assume that we'll have a meeting, each of the next few Mondays, and hopefully we'll be completely through this and we'll have an idea as to our budget capacity by the time President's Day weekend rolls around. But that would be the goal, is, through this month of February, we'd meet the next several Mondays and get the bulk of this work done, a solid 4 to 6 weeks ahead of when the warrant would close. So that's the thought. Any thoughts people would like to share? Does that work well? Do Mondays still work the next several weeks? Do people have conflicts, or is that pretty much a good plan?
It's good for me.
Mondays are fine.
Yeah.
Okay, Francine.
Mondays are
Okay.
good.
Great. And I guess what I'd suggest is, if you're not going to be able to attend one of the meetings, just shoot an email and let us know. Instead of affirmative response, just affirm a negative response. Everyone's been present. So but if you're not going to make it, you're not going to make it, just let us know so that we can make sure we have a quorum. And if we have to, we pull Ralph in to make sure we've got a quorum. But we've always been over attended, which is fantastic. So I think this point's probably moot, but, and I think that's it.
Michelle has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. She does.
That's okay.
Michelle, you control the Zoom. You get to speak whenever you want.
No. I just wanted to ask for next Monday, do you think it's feasible to have IT and schools on the same night? Or would you rather do schools than IT?
One or the other, because IT has got a boatload of money that they're requesting.
It's a boatload of money, but it's just 2 requests.
It's a big ask with it, yeah.
So it's completely up to you, just as I guess just let me know by Wednesday so we can set the agenda and let,
Well, how about this? Let's have IT in schools, with schools also on the calendar for the week following, because
Okay.
I think we should try to end by about 9:30, 9:45.
that's fair. I'll notify all and see, what
Does
their
everyone
schedule-
agree?
Yeah, and if
Francine?
you've got your liaison meeting with Ron, tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yeah.
Why don't we circle up after you do your liaison meeting? And is Ralph joining you for that?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Why don't we just follow up and see where, how you feel about, about his preparedness to come and actually explain this concisely to us.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm figuring that we are going to have quite a few questions, and there may well be discussion.
Yeah.
So I think if Michelle would like to try and organize some meetings, best thing to do would be to list them in the way I suggested, which is IT in schools, with schools part 2 the week following.
Would you go to schools first next week? I mean, I hate to have them sit through Ron's presentation.
Well, why make Ron sit through their presentation?
Right.
And then where do you split off?
Yeah.
Well, Ron also can, talk to the PA system that's on the school's request.
That's fair.
So I don't know, I guess let's see how tomorrow goes, Mike, and then we'll
Yeah.
go from there.
Will you sit in on that, Michelle? Were you
I
planning to?
I wasn't planning to, but I can.
I think it would be helpful. Just
Okay.
now, tell me if that's really not in your role or your responsibility, because I don't want to drag you into something you're not, you're not expected to do. But I feel that you've got such a really good handle on all of the different requests that are going in that it'd be just good, even as an advisor to this group,
Sure.
in a future meeting, it'd be, I think, good, helpful for you to be there.
Yep, happy to do it if you just want to send along the invitation.
Sure. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle, does IT purchasing come through you?
It does.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, I guess to both of you, one of the key questions I could foresee in the, in the capital budget meeting, when IT comes is, how, how we get best pricing on IT equipment, whether it's state bid list or not.
Yeah.
Whether or not there's still E-rate, rebates that come back to us, how those are actually collected and, how they ultimately flow back to capital budget. I'm not sure we ever even closed. I certainly want to find out if we ever closed the loop on that issue when we did the initial, IT deployment. I mean, I'm pretty sure that, all that stuff was, almost all of it was E-rate. We were supposed to get money back. And I know the program was running, a year or more behind schedule in terms of getting rebates back, but I don't remember the rebates actually ever coming back.
I'll ask that question tomorrow.
Yeah.
And Michelle, you'll be, if you're attending, you can also speak to it with more knowledge than I do. But I certainly get rebate, certainly understand the concept.
Sure, and then we can talk about buying off a state contract versus going out to bid on certain items where
Right.
it's advantageous.
Yep. Good deal.
There are only a couple of vendors of network equipment. So my guess is all this stuff is on state bid list. I'd be shocked if it's not, but.
Okay. That'll be on my list for sure.
Okay. All right, folks. Anything else for this evening?
Oh, good. Thank you.
Okay. Michelle, have you had any communication with the schools about their readiness to go next week?
I have not. There's
Okay.
been a lot of communication with the schools because the school building facility study is underway.
Right.
So I can certainly reach out to them tomorrow.
Okay. Francine, I'm going to reach out to you. We actually need to have a conversation with the business manager up there about the buses and a few other items just prior to the presentation to capitals. Most of this stuff is self-explanatory, but some of it, I think we just need to understand exactly where their thoughts are.
Great. Thank you.
How's your week look? Any times better or worse than others? Or if you can shoot me an email if that helps.
Yeah, let me look at my calendar because
Okay, please
I
do.
do have some conferences this week that I
Oh.
can't, or meetings that I can't move around.
Okay. Great. Shoot me your availability. I'll try and work work with it. Okay.
Okay,
Hey,
great. I
Michelle,
will.
sorry to interrupt. It is an in-person meeting tomorrow at the middle high school.
Oh, okay. What time?
I don't, are you able to do that?
Yeah, I don't see why not, as long as I don't have a conflict.
Okay. I'm going to forward the meeting invite to you now.
Okay.
But it is 10:30 to noon in room 275 in the middle high school.
Right. Michelle, if you're fully preoccupied with a long list of stuff to do already, don't hesitate to tell us.
Okay.
Okay.
I won't be shy.
Perfect.
And one last thing, I will have the minutes for tonight and for last week to you all by next Monday.
Perfect.
Great, thank you.
All right. Super. So next week we'll shoot for schools and IT, at least one or the other. Hopefully both. All right, all. Anything else, or if not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I need it first.
Oh, sorry, sorry.
I'll second Francine's
It's
motion.
late. Oh, my God.
It is late.
I'm falling.
You all
asleep
look
here.
really,
So
really
Francine's moved.
chipper
Michael,
ready
you
to go
second.
after.
All right, the time is 9:44. I'll take a roll call vote. Michael Dick,
Mike Dick, aye.
Francine Lyons,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Ralph Dormitzer, you're back. He's still on mute. Brian Host, aye. So we've got 4-0, and we've adjourned at 9:44.
Good.
All right, all. Have a great evening.
You too. Good job.
Take care. Thanks.
Good night.